January 26, 1945. 2 p.m. Near Holtzwihr, eastern France. Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy stood in frozen mud watching his company die. For 6 days, they had been fighting through the Colmar Pocket, trying to push German forces back across the Rhine. His company had started with 128 men. Now he had 19 left. 19 boys, most of them teenagers, spread across a thin line of foxholes in a snowy field. And coming toward them through the trees were 6 German Panzer tanks and 250 infantry soldiers. Murphy was 19 years old. He weighed 112 pounds. He had lied about his age to join the army 3 years earlier after his mother died and left him to care for 9 younger siblings in rural Texas. Now he was about to make a decision that would either save his men or kill them all. Behind him, an M10 tank destroyer sat burning after taking a direct hit. Ammunition was cooking off inside, sending sparks and smoke into the gray winter sky. Murphy looked at the burning vehicle. He looked at his 19 men in their foxholes. He looked at the German tanks rolling toward them across the open ground. Then he did something that no officer is trained to do, that no tactical manual recommends, that violated every instinct of self-preservation. He ran toward the burning tank destroyer and climbed on top of it. This is a story about what happens when impossible circumstances meet extraordinary courage. If you want more deep dives into the real stories behind World War II, the moments that define the war and the people who lived them, subscribe to the channel. These stories deserve to be told. What Murphy did in the next hour would earn him the Medal of Honor, make him the most decorated American soldier of World War II, and create a legend that Hollywood would struggle to believe. But before we get to that frozen field in France, before we understand what drove a teenage lieutenant to stand on a burning tank while an entire German company tried to kill him, we need to understand who Audie Murphy was and how he got there. Audie Leon Murphy grew up in Kingston, Texas during the Depression. His family was sharecroppers, which meant they were poor even by Depression standards. His father abandoned the family when Audie was young. His mother died of illness when he was 16. Audie, the oldest boy, tried to keep his siblings together, but the family scattered. He picked cotton, worked odd jobs, and went hungry more often than not. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, Murphy saw the army as a way out and a way to send money home to his younger brothers and sisters. He tried to enlist the day after Pearl Harbor but was rejected for being underweight and underage. He was 17, weighed 110 pounds, and looked about 14. The Marines turned him down. The Navy turned him down. Finally, the Army accepted him after he gained a few pounds and lied about his age. He was assigned to the 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division. The 3rd Infantry would see more combat days than any other American division in the European theater. Murphy wasn't a natural soldier at first. He was small, quiet, and looked too young to shave. His drill sergeant thought he'd wash out. But Murphy had something that couldn't be taught. He was calm under fire. Some men panic when bullets start flying. Their hands shake, their minds freeze, they can't think clearly. Murphy's mind became clearer. Combat focused him. His first action was in Sicily in 1943. He was 18 years old. By the time his unit reached mainland Italy, Murphy had killed his first German soldiers and earned his first promotion. By the time they landed in southern France in August 1944, Murphy was a sergeant and had a reputation. His fellow soldiers noticed that Murphy never seemed afraid. Officers noticed that Murphy had an instinct for reading terrain and predicting where the enemy would be. German soldiers noticed that when Murphy's platoon was attacking, they were in serious trouble. But Murphy had a problem that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Every friend he made in combat died. His best friend from basic training was killed in Sicily. The first sergeant who mentored him died in Italy. The lieutenant who recommended him for promotion was killed by a sniper in France. Murphy kept fighting, kept earning medals, kept getting promoted. By January 1945, at age 19, he was a second lieutenant commanding Company B of the 15th Infantry. He had earned 2 Silver Stars, 3 Purple Hearts, and more combat decorations than most soldiers earn in a full career. But he rarely smiled anymore. The quiet country boy from Texas had seen too much death. The Colmar Pocket was supposed to be a cleanup operation. By January 1945, the Allies had liberated most of France. German forces were retreating toward the Rhine River and Germany itself. But one pocket of German resistance remained in eastern France, near the town of Colmar. The German 19th Army, about 50,000 troops, held a bridgehead west of the Rhine. The Allied command wanted them eliminated before pushing into Germany. The 3rd Infantry Division drew the assignment. It should have been simple. It wasn't. The Germans defending the Colmar Pocket were veterans. They knew the terrain. They had prepared defensive positions. And they were fighting with the desperation of men who knew that crossing the Rhine meant going home to a Germany that was being bombed to rubble. They weren't going to retreat easily. Murphy's company had been fighting for 6 straight days when they reached the woods near Holtzwihr on January 26th. They were exhausted, under strength, and low on ammunition. But their orders were clear. Hold the line. Prevent German forces from breaking out of the pocket. What Murphy didn't know was that the Germans were planning a major counterattack. Not a probe. Not a skirmish. A full-scale assault with armor support, designed to smash through American lines and open an escape route to the Rhine. At 2 p.m., Murphy's position came under artillery fire. Then the tanks appeared. 6 of them, rolling out of the tree line about 200 yards away. Behind them came German infantry, moving in spread formation across the snowy field. Murphy made a quick estimate. At least 250 soldiers, maybe more. He had 19 men and no anti-tank weapons heavy enough to stop a Panzer. His company had 2 M10 tank destroyers in support, but one had already been hit and was burning. The other pulled back immediately when it saw 6 German tanks. That was standard doctrine. You don't fight 6 tanks with one. Murphy grabbed his radio and called for artillery support. The response was not encouraging. Artillery could fire, but it would take time to range in, and they were running low on shells because every American unit in the Colmar Pocket was in heavy combat. Murphy looked at his options. They were all bad. If his men stayed in their foxholes, the German tanks would roll right over them or the infantry would overrun them. If they retreated across the open field behind them, the German tanks would cut them down in the open. Murphy made his decision. He ordered his men to fall back to a wood line 200 yards behind their position. They could dig in there, reorganize, and at least have cover. His men started pulling back, keeping low, using what cover they could find. The Germans saw the movement and increased their fire. Murphy stayed forward, using his radio to call in whatever artillery support he could get. He gave the artillery observer coordinates for German positions. Then he looked at the burning M10 tank destroyer and made a decision that still seems insane. The M10 was burning, but it wasn't exploding. The fuel tank had been hit and was on fire, but the ammunition hadn't blown yet. The .50 caliber machine gun mounted on top was still intact. And Murphy suddenly realized that the M10, positioned slightly elevated on a small rise, had a perfect field of fire across the entire German advance. If someone could get to that machine gun, they could hold off the German infantry while his men retreated to safety. The problem was obvious. The M10 was on fire. Ammunition was cooking off inside. The fuel tank could explode at any moment. Standing on top of a burning vehicle full of ammunition and fuel while 250 enemy soldiers shot at you was suicide. Murphy ran for the tank destroyer. He climbed onto the burning M10, pulled himself up to the machine gun mount, and opened fire. The .50 caliber machine gun is a devastating weapon. It fires rounds the size of a human finger at a rate of 500 rounds per minute. At 200 yards, it can cut a man in half. Murphy aimed at the advancing German infantry and squeezed the trigger. The first burst dropped 3 soldiers. The Germans, who had been moving forward confidently behind their tanks, suddenly realized someone was firing at them from the burning American vehicle they thought was abandoned. They returned fire. Bullets snapped past Murphy's head, ricocheted off the M10's armor, and kicked up snow around the tank destroyer. Murphy kept firing. He worked the machine gun in short, controlled bursts, the way he'd been trained. The German infantry advance slowed. Men dropped. Others dove for cover. The German tanks kept coming, but without infantry support, tanks were vulnerable. They can't see well. They can't clear foxholes or buildings. They need infantry. Murphy's machine gun was stopping the infantry. But Murphy had another problem. He was alone on top of a burning tank destroyer with no cover. German soldiers could see him clearly and were concentrating their fire on him. And the M10 was still burning underneath him. Murphy could feel the heat through his boots. Smoke poured around him. Every few seconds, a small ammunition explosion would go off inside the hull, sending sparks and shrapnel rattling around. The metal deck was so hot it was starting to burn through his uniform. But Murphy didn't stop firing. He couldn't. The moment he stopped, the German infantry would advance. His 19 men, retreating across the open field, would be caught in the open and killed. So Murphy kept firing. He also kept calling in artillery fire. Murphy had a field telephone with him, strung from a line back to his command post. While firing the machine gun with one hand, he used his other hand to pick up the telephone and call for artillery. An officer at the Fire Direction Center asked for his position. Murphy gave coordinates. Then Murphy did something that artillery officers are trained never to do. He called for fire in his own position. The officer on the other end thought Murphy was confused or panicking. Murphy wasn't confused. He knew exactly what he was asking for. German infantry was all around the M10, trying to flank it. Murphy wanted artillery shells to land within 50 yards of where he was standing. The officer asked Murphy to confirm. Murphy confirmed. Then Murphy said something that would become famous. He told the artillery to fire for effect on the position he just left, meaning fire every gun all at once, right where he was standing. The artillery officer later said he thought Murphy had lost his mind, but he gave the fire order. American artillery shells started landing around the M10. Explosions erupted in the snow. Shrapnel flew. The concussions were so powerful that Murphy felt them through the deck of the tank destroyer. But the artillery was working. German infantry that had been trying to flank the M10 scattered or were killed. The German tanks, seeing their infantry support shredded, slowed their advance. They were less than 100 yards away now, close enough that Murphy could see the commanders in their turrets. The Germans concentrated all their fire on the burning M10. Machine gun fire, tank shells, rifle fire, everything they had. Murphy kept firing back. He went through one ammunition belt, reloaded, went through another belt. The .50 caliber machine gun was so hot the barrels started to glow. Murphy's uniform was scorched. His boots were burning. He had been wounded in the leg by shrapnel at some point but didn't realize it because of the adrenaline and the chaos. He just kept firing. This went on for nearly an hour. 60 minutes of Murphy standing on top of a burning tank destroyer, alone, trading fire with 250 German soldiers and 6 tanks. His company, watching from the wood line 200 yards back, couldn't believe what they were seeing. Some men thought Murphy had gone crazy. Others thought he was buying time for them and might actually pull it off. German commanders couldn't understand why their advance had stalled. They had overwhelming numbers. They had armor support. They should have rolled right through this position. But one American on a burning tank with a machine gun was holding them off. German soldiers later said they thought there must be a full platoon in the woods around the M10, that the burning tank destroyer was a decoy covering a larger force. They couldn't believe one man was doing this. Finally, Murphy ran out of ammunition. The machine gun clicked empty. He looked at the ammunition boxes around him. All empty. He looked at the German infantry, still 75 yards away, starting to realize the machine gun had stopped firing. He looked at the M10 underneath him, still burning, the flames now licking up around the machine gun mount. Murphy grabbed his rifle and climbed down from the tank destroyer. He limped back toward his company's position. His leg was bleeding badly now. He had been shot through the calf and hadn't noticed. He made it about 50 yards before the M10 exploded. The fuel tank finally went up, sending a fireball 30 feet into the air. Ammunition cooked off in a chain reaction. The explosion was so powerful it knocked Murphy forward into the snow. If he had stayed on the tank destroyer another 30 seconds, he would have been killed instantly. Murphy reached his company's position and collapsed. His men pulled him into cover. A medic started working on his leg. Murphy refused morphine because he wanted to stay alert in case the Germans attacked again. But the Germans didn't attack. The counterattack had failed. Murphy's machine gun fire and the artillery he called in had killed or wounded approximately 50 German soldiers. The German tanks, without infantry support and facing determined American artillery fire, had withdrawn. The German breakout attempt at this sector had been stopped by one lieutenant on a burning tank. Murphy's company commander, who had been killed 2 days earlier and was replaced by another officer who arrived just after the action, wrote Murphy for the Medal of Honor. When headquarters read the after-action report, they didn't believe it. They sent officers to interview Murphy's men to verify the story. Every soldier in Company B confirmed what happened. Some added details that Murphy hadn't mentioned, like the fact that he had smiled while firing the machine gun, or that he had cursed out the Germans in between bursts of fire. Murphy himself said very little about it. When asked why he did it, he shrugged and said his men needed time to get to cover. When asked if he was scared, he said he didn't have time to think about being scared. The Medal of Honor was presented to Murphy by General Jacob Devers on June 2, 1945, a month after Germany surrendered. By that time, Murphy had earned 33 awards and medals, including every combat decoration the Army could give. He was the most decorated American soldier of World War II. He was 20 years old. But Murphy didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a survivor. All of his close friends from the war were dead. He had recurring nightmares. He would later describe symptoms that we now recognize as severe PTSD, but that the Army in 1945 called battle fatigue and didn't know how to treat. Murphy was sent home to a hero's welcome. Parades, speeches, magazine covers. Life magazine put him on the cover. Hollywood came calling. Murphy became an actor, appearing in over 40 films, most of them westerns. In 1955, he wrote his autobiography, To Hell and Back, which became a bestseller. Universal Studios turned it into a movie with Murphy playing himself. The film was Universal's highest-grossing picture for 20 years until Jaws. But Murphy struggled. He had nightmares for the rest of his life. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow. He became an advocate for better treatment of veterans with what we now call PTSD. He spoke publicly about his own struggles, which was rare for combat veterans in that era. Murphy died in a plane crash in 1971 at age 45. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. His grave is the second most visited grave site at Arlington after John F. Kennedy's. The battle near Holtzwihr raises questions that military historians still study. What makes someone run toward danger when every instinct says run away? Murphy's company had 19 men left out of 128. They were exhausted, outgunned, and facing overwhelming odds. Murphy could have ordered a retreat, pulled everyone back, and no one would have blamed him. That was the tactically sound decision. Instead, he climbed onto a burning vehicle and fought alone. But Murphy never gave a clear answer. He said his men needed time. He said someone had to do it. He said he didn't think about it, he just acted. But his fellow soldiers offered another explanation. Murphy, they said, felt responsible for every man in his company. When soldiers under his command died, Murphy took it personally. He couldn't save all of them, but he could try. And at Holtzwihr, trying meant standing on a burning tank with a machine gun. There's something else about Murphy's action that military analysts still discuss. By all tactical doctrine, what Murphy did should not have worked. One man with a machine gun cannot stop 250 infantry and 6 tanks. The Germans should have flanked him, suppressed him with tank fire, or simply waited for the M10 to explode. But Murphy understood something about psychology. The German infantry had been advancing confidently behind armor. Suddenly they were taking casualties from accurate machine gun fire. In combat, especially when you're advancing across open ground, accurate fire creates panic. German soldiers dove for cover. They tried to locate the source. They called for tank support. All of that took time. And time was what Murphy's men needed. Murphy wasn't trying to win the battle. He was trying to buy minutes. Those minutes saved lives. The action at Holtzwihr also demonstrated something about artillery that would influence American tactics for the rest of the war. Murphy called fire on his own position, trusting that American artillery would be accurate enough to kill Germans 50 yards away without killing him. That level of confidence in artillery precision was unusual. But Murphy knew his artillery units. He had worked with them for months. He knew their gun crews, knew their forward observers, and trusted their accuracy. That relationship between infantry and artillery, that trust, became a hallmark of American military effectiveness. German generals after the war said that American artillery was the weapon they feared most, more than tanks, more than aircraft. Murphy's action showed why. American artillery could put shells within 50 yards of friendly forces and do it fast. But perhaps the most important lesson from Holtzwihr is about leadership. Murphy was an officer, but he was also only 19 years old. He had been commanding Company B for less than a month. Yet his men trusted him enough that when he ordered them to retreat, they did, even though it meant leaving him alone. That trust came from the fact that Murphy never asked his men to do anything he wouldn't do himself. He led from the front. He took the same risks they took. And when the moment came, he took the biggest risk so they wouldn't have to. That's the kind of leadership that can't be taught in officer school. It comes from character. After the war, German officers who had fought at the Colmar Pocket were interviewed about American tactics. When asked about the action at Holtzwihr, one German company commander said something revealing. He said his men had been told that Americans were soft, that they would break under pressure, that German veterans would easily defeat them. Then they ran into soldiers like Murphy who did impossible things. The German officer said it was demoralizing to face an enemy who refused to be beaten. That's what Murphy represented to the Germans at Holtzwihr. Not just firepower, not just tactics, but an enemy who simply would not quit. So when Murphy climbed onto that burning M10 tank destroyer on January 26, 1945, he wasn't thinking about medals or glory or becoming the most decorated American soldier of the war. He was thinking about 19 boys in foxholes who needed time to reach cover. He was thinking about doing his job, which was keeping his men alive. And he was acting on an instinct that defined his entire combat experience. When things got desperate, when the situation looked hopeless, when everyone else was retreating, Murphy moved forward. That instinct won him 33 medals. It also haunted him for the rest of his life. Because Murphy survived when so many of his friends didn't. And standing on a burning tank while 250 Germans tried to kill him probably felt, in some way, like the only fair thing to do. Thanks for watching this deep dive into one of World War II's most extraordinary moments of courage. If you want more stories about the real people and real events that shaped the war, subscribe to the channel. These stories deserve to be told.